our political leaders, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, have taken us off of a fiscal cliff. I'm going to call it a COVID cliff because ultimately we knew that this number was there. We knew that the date was there. We knew that on yesterday we were going to be crossing over where the benefits that people were getting, meaning $600 a week for the unemployment, and the housing from the standpoint of federal government protections on evictions were going to expire. It was known. It was understood months ago. It was known. It was understood. It wasn't a secret. Nobody was going to be surprised about it. And yet, here we are, crossing over the number. The question becomes, why, right? A few whys. Why am I calling it a fiscal cliff? I'm calling it a fiscal cliff because that's effectively what it is. When people are complaining about the jobs being shipped overseas, what are they basically complaining about? They're saying that a job where I was making $18 an hour gets shipped overseas to some other country where they're paying $3 an hour, and I have lost the capacity to buy this or that. Meaning I've lost the ability to basically pay for myself in this particular system in our particular world. You look at America, and what you will find is a hollowing out of this country, especially with those trade deals like NAFTA, and especially would have been put on hyperdrive with trade deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Calling it a trade deal is kind of too nice. Those things get involved in policy, almost like an end around your own government's policy. My point is this. That took, a decade? What happens when that takes 2 months? That process that before took all of that time to bleed out all of those factory jobs, what happens when that takes place over the course of just a few months? And over the top, on top of that, you have 30 million people out of a job. For the moment, let's put aside the 150,000 dead, the 1,500 that died the other day. Let's put aside those numbers and just deal with the economic realities of it. 30 million people or more are out of a job. You already had 20 million people that didn't have health care before this hit. That number has gone up by 10 million or more after COVID-19, which means that those are people who are in the middle of a pandemic without health care. On top of that, many of the people who recovered from COVID-19 still had secondary symptoms or other issues that arose from working with that particular virus. What that means is between the people that have died and between the people who no longer have as much purchasing power because being ill, they might have lost either their job or lost their ability to function in the same job. It's a stress on the economy, meaning the fact that they're making less hurts the economy. You don't get as much money and revenue that's circulating in your system. Think about it from the standpoint of the stores that were closed down. Think about it from the standpoint of people who don't want to go back to those stores and engage in their previous behavior because they're concerned that that previous behavior may get them or somebody else they care about killed. Think about, for this moment, for retail, for example. You had 30 million people who 30% of people who had difficulty paying for food last month. You had another 30% of people who couldn't pay their rent in July. And this is not just people, this is also private entities, meaning commercial real estate. Nearly half of them weren't able to pay the bills that were necessary to keep those properties intact. That stuff is going to cascade all throughout your system. When Congress gave people $600, what do you think they did with the money? You think they were ballers, or you think they used that money in order to pay for things that they needed? I guarantee you it was to pay for things that they needed. Even the $1,200, many of those people who didn't necessarily have a job was using that money in order to get them from point A to point B, either buying food, medicine, or for that matter, rent. And that's assuming that the rent was under $1,200. That money dried up. If 30% couldn't afford food in July with the $600, how many are not going to be able to afford it now that the money is gone? It's not a situation where people don't want to work. And the arguments that Republicans are making that there's some kind of disincentive to go back to work is utter nonsense. even if those people make a little bit more money, $200 more. Basically, we're talking about people who are making low-wage jobs in and of themselves, and the $600 gives them a little bit more than what they were getting prior. So what? So what? That money is being spent back into the economy. I don't believe for a moment that it's a disincentive for those people to go back to work. I suspect the virus is the disincentive for them to go back to work. And the fact of the matter is, each and every one of those people know that this is temporary, meaning nobody is on the dole and thinking that that's going to last for years. No. The jobs aren't there, is the issue. They're not there. And if you have an issue with people making more money on the dole than they do on their jobs, maybe you need to raise the minimum wage. So that contradiction is no longer there. Here's the thing, though. Republicans and Democrats basically agreed that this is where the fight is going to take place. Both of them have different perspectives on this very specific issue. It would be like if we were both playing a game of chess. I see something on the queen's side. I think I can make gains on that. You disbelieve that I can make gains on that. And so the fight becomes that very specific point on the board. Well, in this very specific case, the point on the board to which they're fighting is the pain and the misery of the American public. And all of them, Pelosi and McConnell, has basically bet that that pain and that misery of those people sitting there not able to pay their rent, not able to buy their food, not able to get their medication, that pain and misery quantified is a benefit and leverage for their political objectives. Both parties believes this. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you, the opportunity for allowing me to do so. I am back, clearly. It's been a week that YouTube has basically shut my channel down, so fortunately I'm back. Hopefully I can stay back. Yesterday, we crossed over the COVID cliff. The money that people were using just to make ends meet, the rental assistance that they were getting so they wouldn't be thrown out of their homes, up in smoke. It was understood that the people needed it. It was understood that those jobs weren't there. It was understood that COVID-19 was surging and raging, and that in and of itself made it difficult to maintain those jobs, or for that matter, even people going to various places that might be open because they're concerned about catching the virus. When you have 1,500 people die, you're basically back to the worst cases of this, where you didn't even get past the first phase before they started to open up the economy. Well, Republicans and Democrats have basically come to the conclusion that they're going to fight on this issue, that the misery, the people dying, the money, or the states not having the money to adequately cover their ends, the rents where people are thrown out of their home. All of these things have been the deciding factor to fight over. And the question becomes, which one wins? Who has the leading argument in order to make this particular point win? The thing is, Democrats tend to fold on issues like this, but there's a difference. Donald Trump has been remarkably bad on the issue of COVID-19, and the public has deemed it so. And because the public deems it so, an overwhelming majority of the public considers his actions in regards to COVID as being utterly and entirely incompetent. And his polling reflects such. Before all of this stuff hit, Donald Trump and Joe Biden were basically level, neck and neck in the polls. After COVID-19 and people saw how incompetent he was, well, that went up in smoke. Well, in this case, though, Donald Trump is in a difficult situation. He's been failing miserably. Joe Biden hasn't had to really do anything. And in this case, Trump has to find some way out of this quagmire, especially considering that an election is coming up in just a few months. I think it's like less than 100 days at this point. People need money, period. They need to be able to afford and pay for the things that they need, period. When the people who are in these dire straits because of the way the economy has taken a hit, meaning all of these jobs going up in smoke and everything else, that's not their fault. And not just not their fault, those jobs don't exist for those people to get those jobs in the first place. Donald Trump could have called for a federal jobs guarantee. Donald Trump could have said, look, we want to make sure each and every person in this country has solar power, and we're going to start hiring people for the federal government to teach and to implement that all across the United States. Meaning, pick a big project, put a lot of people on that project, and start hiring those people so you can sop up the fact that 30 million people no longer have a job. That's off the table. Trump is never going to do that. You can ensure that the people have health care. Donald Trump is not going to do that. You can ensure that the difficulties that people have, especially around this notion of income, are maintained, meaning those people are maintained. Donald Trump is not even necessarily going to do that. So basically what you have is a political fight where the president is all but sidelined, unless he's kind of working with the Republicans in order to try to push them along. You have Mitch McConnell, who basically says, unless some bill has corporate liability associated with it, I will not be bringing it to the floor. The Republicans, some of which even go so far as to say, I'm not voting for any of this stuff because I don't think the American public should get anything. And so you have a party that is arguing with itself and the Democrats that just have a showpiece. Now, Democrats are probably going to fold on a lot of the stuff that they're pushing for. By the same token, Republicans, I think, are not in the stronger position as they believe. Trump is going to be a dinner bell around their throats, especially on this notion of COVID-19. And as bad as he does, so go they. Meaning, they're going to look at Trump and say he's a Republican. They're going to look at other Republicans and say they're Republicans. And his dark image is going to have a dark effect on them and their ability to maintain and keep the Senate. Now, depending on what that bill is, but the longer that misery goes, the more pressure it's going to be put on one side. Each is going to be pushing to blame the other so they can try to eschew blame for themselves. But each, in this very specific moment, believe that their argument is better than the other side. Mitch McConnell so fervently believed this that he basically pushed Congress, well, they're not going to open up again until until Monday at 3 p.m. I'm making the point that your political leaders have made the choice that your pain and misery is the leverage that they're going to use to try to get the other one to cater to their whims. I would wish that there was a higher rationality where something like this wouldn't necessarily take place, where this wouldn't even be up for contention, where nobody in their right mind would think of using a person being flung out of their home, or for that matter, not having the ability to pay for just the basic food that they need to get from point A to point B. And yet, here we are. Here we are. Look, all sorts of havoc is going to be wreaked by this. The money that was being used to keep the economy afloat, that's no longer there. The rents, those people are going to get thrown out of their homes. Many already have. That number is going to get monstrous the further and further into the months that you get beyond the point of people getting the ends that they need. The money that they were getting from the standpoint of unemployment was basically keeping people afloat and keeping them on a subsistence. That has been eliminated. And the question becomes, how long is it going to take Congress to deal with that? All of these people are rich. None of these people have the pressing issue of not knowing where the next month's rent is going to come from, or for that matter, begging the landlord not to kick you out, or the embarrassment of having an eviction notice on your door when you walk up or your kids walk up. I'm saying these are things that we should not have in our society in and of itself, almost as an absolute. And yet, in a financial crisis, when you need the government to actually do its goddamn job, what you end up with is a lot of feckless, weak people of low morality and ethics that is willing to use the pain and injury of the American population in order to try to get some kind of deal. They took all of the time in the world to make sure that the rich were maintained in those first bills. And now we're getting to the rest of us. And we get to see how much we actually matter. Or, for that matter, not at all. They should be ashamed of themselves. And the fact that Republicans are arguing, oh no, we need financial liability shield. Andrew Cuomo in New York shuffles people into a nursing home. As he shuffles people into a nursing home, he doesn't allow the nursing home to actually check to see whether or not the person had COVID-19. On top of that, to put a cherry on top, he pushes through a provision that basically shields them from liability. Meaning you had, 42% of the cases of COVID-19 in the United States take place either from people who were in the nursing home themselves or staffed those nursing homes. At least that's what it was a few months ago. Meaning 42% of the COVID-19 cases took place in less than 1% of the population. Cuomo was instrumental in ensuring those nursing homes became death traps. Mitch McConnell is now trying to get a liability shield on whatever bill that goes through. Meaning his fight is for corporate America, even as Americans themselves go hungry, go without health care, and basically go without a home. Our government and the politics of this government has gotten disgusting. And, whether that's Joe Biden or whether that's Trump, there is no voting solution for this issue. This issue is with bodies in the streets. And whether that's with people who are homeless, arm in arm, whether that's with people who don't have money to feed themselves, again, arm in arm, solidarity on this front. Because a lot of people are going to go through some traumatic times. And you're talking about millions of people in this country that are going through those times at no fault of their own. I have no belief that anybody in this country should go without food, go without shelter. And fact of the matter is, our technological progress in regards to the world, we have the capacity to ensure that each and every person on this planet is fed, clothed, have a roof over their head, and can have various jobs that are interesting, have agency associated with it, where they can grow as human beings in regards to the larger narrative. I don't believe for a moment that people don't necessarily want to work. I don't think they necessarily want to work at McDonald's. I do think that people, given the opportunity, of course would work. Of course. Our system is going to change. Many of those retail stores are not coming back. Many of the stores that are open now may not be getting the business beforehand. Places that was using Grubhub was basically being gutted by Grubhub, who was basically taking advantage of the situation. And a lot of the people who went back to work immediately were just furloughed. The catch is that those jobs just aren't there anymore, which is why you have 30-something million people who just are out of work. If people had the capacity to get good paying, interesting jobs, they will take the opportunity to do so. The tools that people learn by which to operate on is to some degree governed by what your society has basically allowed to take place. And consider the conversation we're having for the moment. The political leaders in the country set a date. They set that date knowing that the benefits and everything else that they had, the meager benefits at that, were going to expire. They decided to bitch and moan and complain about the amount of money that dirt poor people were getting. And because they were getting $100 or $200 more, that they said, nope, we can't go through this process again. And so they want to fuck it up entirely. Do you know the things that they want to do? The systems in the various states don't even have the capabilities to do those things, meaning the time frame that it takes for people to get their money will expand that much more. This is our government. This is our government. I would say they should be ashamed of themselves, but they're not. They're rich. They're out of touch. And because they're rich and out of touch, you have this weird situation where their philosophical responsibility gets tossed to the side. And you get a real honest to God look at how they regard you. If we as human beings cared about one another, as we as human beings had a value upon each and one of us, meaning that you, just because of who you are, being born into our particular society, we regard you as being valuable because of such. And as such, we're going to ensure that when you grow up, you're going to have the basic things that you need to make a decent life. We don't do that. We have a situation where everybody is scraping off of everyone else in order to just make ends meet in our system. And we don't ensure that those kids are taken care in good places. We don't ensure that those kids are growing up in safe neighborhoods. Hell, Chicago has number one cause of death being gun violence for people who are 21 and 34, I believe. This is not acts of God. These are acts of policy. If you're tired of that, the way to change that is to ensure that people have what they need, people can get the education to the degree that they want to get the education, that if they're sick, they have health care. And yeah, jobs are available that are interesting and that allows a certain degree of agency and creativity in pursuit of their objectives. Until you get that, basically Maslow's needs, you are going to suffer as a society. In this very specific instance, our political instrument has basically told us to fuck off and has gone over a fiscal cliff that they themselves are not directly affected by. Nancy Pelosi has $100 million in the bank, where she's talking about all of that ice cream and everything else. She's not touched by this in real world terms. The people who are in Congress, many of them, the majority, are not touched by this. So the best that they can give you is an intellectual understanding of where you're coming from. And many of them don't even have an ideology that will be okay with the government ensuring that the public is made whole. But this is our government, right? These are the people who we put in office. And it's just so happened that their weakness, fecklessness, and even the low morality, where they would use this as a fighting point on both sides of the political instrument. It's just appalling. That's all. I'll end this here. Like, share,